You're watching The Hill on News Nation, and I am Chris Steyerwald, and I am filling in for Blake Berman. It's another busy Friday in Washington as President Trump celebrates a Supreme Court decision limiting the power of lower federal courts to issue nationwide injunctions. It's a big win for his effort to end birthright citizenship.
This is a decision that covers a tremendous amount of territory, but I want to just thank again the Supreme Court for this ruling. It's a giant. It's a giant.
Here on Capitol Hill, the Senate is scrambling to finish its work on the president's big package of tax cuts and spending increases in time for a 4th of July finale. But word today is that deadline may be slipping. And outside the Beltway, Democrats grappling with the rise of the Democratic Socialists. New fault lines for the blue team as New Yorkers wait for word on a Cuomo-Mamdani rematch. Plus, the ceasefire between Iran and Israel seems to be holding. What does the future hold for Tehran's nuclear program? President Trump says he's not afraid to bomb Iran again. We go live to the Middle East for the latest. We're going to get into all of it. But let's start at the White House, where News Nation's Kelly Meyer has more on the president's visit to the briefing room. Kelly, what do you know?
Yeah, hey there, Chris. So the Supreme Court handing President Trump a win. This allows his executive order restricting birthright citizenship to go into effect in some areas of the country, at least for now, by limiting judges' ability to block the president's policies nationwide. So President Trump today taking that victory lap in the briefing room.
This is really also a decision based on common sense. It didn't work the other way. It was a disaster where somebody from a certain location in a very liberal state or a liberal judge or a liberal group of judges could tie up a whole country for years.
And here's Justice Amy Coney Barrett in the majority opinion writing, quote, these injunctions, known as universal injunctions, likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has granted to federal courts. In her dissent, Sotomayor wrote, no right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. Today, the threat is to birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, a different administration may try to seize firearms from law-abiding citizens or prevent people of certain faiths from gathering to worship. Now, the justices did not definitively resolve the legality of this executive order. It doesn't answer whether restrictions on birthright citizenship are constitutional. Attorney General here today said that they will likely be decided in October in the next session. Chris.
Kelly Meyer, we thank you. Happy Friday. Now, let's make sense of this. Let's bring in Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the first Trump White House and News Nation contributor, plus our friend Scott Bolden. He's the former D.C. Democratic Party chairman. He is also a News Nation contributor, in addition to being quite an attorney. Scott, it sounds like another case where the court giveth and the court taketh away, a big win on presidential power with limits on nationwide injunctions, but a foreshadowing of what may be a future defeat on the Trump effort to end birthright citizenship. Sort it out for us.
Well, so these are mutually exclusive issues. Universal injunctions, the court struck that down. I've got to say that about that very briefly. The birthright citizenship is written into the Constitution. I don't know how the court's going to get around that. And as you know, you have to have a legal and factual pathway to strike that down. So that hasn't been struck down yet. I wouldn't take a victory lap if I was the White House, though. They seem to be doing that because lawyers like me will get around that limitation on the injunction. If you've got a national executive order that covers, for example, DOJ, for example, and all federal employees, then lawyers are just going to file on behalf of any number of clients or file a class action suit. It may take longer to get, but okay, that's a challenge, but lawyers are problem solvers, so they'll figure that part out. The real key here is what is the Supreme Court going to do? Are they going to be a full partner with this White House or a partial partner with this White House, as they've been so far? Because they've limited the injunctions. They haven't taken up birthright citizenship yet, and that's going to be a tough one for them.
Okay, Mick, these nationwide injunctions were a huge thorn in your side in the first Trump administration. And now it's sort of like a lot of things, right? We see the ground shifting in the second Trump term. How big a deal is this that these universal injunctions are being reined in?
Yeah, Chris, anytime I get into a legal discussion with Scott, I'm at a huge disadvantage because he's a much better lawyer than I am. But he and I both are old enough to remember that universal injunctions, nationwide injunctions, are a relatively new thing. Yes, they had been used in the past, but very, very sparingly. It wasn't until about the 10 or 15 years ago. It used to be that a district court judge could sort of rule on the law in his district. And then if enough districts disagreed, it might go up to the Court of Appeals, and they would rule in their circuit, in their 5th Appellate Circuit, the 12th Appellate Circuit. And then if you had circuits disagree, you'd go up to the nationwide court, the Supreme Court level. That was the way I was taught it. My guess is it was the way that Scott was taught it as well. So I don't understand what all the hullabaloo is on this part of the decision. Scott's absolutely right. We're going to deal with birthright citizenship later. I think the administration does have its work cut out for it. I don't think they're going to win that. But I don't know why making district courts act in their districts is at all controversial.
Okay, Scott, back to you. The court also upheld a Texas law requiring pornographic websites to verify the ages of users in that state. Now, you are not going to find many people, even in Washington, arguing in favor of making it easier for kids to get porn, but free speech and privacy advocates say that they're concerned about what precedent this may set going forward. What do you think?
Well, the courts have always infringed upon our constitutional rights, the First Amendment, and you've got to have, for health, safety, or security reasons, they've got to have a compelling state interest. And here the court found, and I think rightfully so, I mean, I'm a parent, my kids are grown, rightfully so, that it's okay for the government to require verification of the age of individuals who will look at pornography. I mean, the appellates in this case weren't exactly
not a sympathetic, yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to support the pornography lobby, if you will. But in this case, the court found that they would infringe on that First Amendment right, and that states had a right to require that. Again, delegating it to the states. You could have 25 that say you don't have to verify, and another 25 that say that you do. And this court seems to be in line with the White House that and Republicans, they want to give it all to the states. They don't want consistency. They want the states to figure it out.
Mick, real quick before I let you go, are there concerns ultimately about whether or not we're going to end up with registries and people are going to have to identify themselves, the end of anonymity online, and those other things down a slippery slope from here? Is that something you ever think about?
You know, I don't know if it's a slippery slope. I mean, it's one of the concerns a lot of us have had about the social media sites from the very beginning is that you could essentially defame people as in an anonymous fashion. It's that old Section 260 protection from the 1990s that social media sites were able to carve out back before the technology evolved. So I think it's a good conversation to have. I'm not worried about slippery slopes here, and I'm in the libertarian wing of my party. But Scott's right. Pornography's always been different. Guns have always been different. Alcohol has always been a little bit different. So, again, I think the court probably found correctly here. Yeah, you might have 25 states going one way and 25 another, but that's the American system.
That's quite a three-number combo for Friday evening. We appreciate it.
That's the Republican system. That's the Republican system.
All right, no, we got to go. We got to save some for next week. Gentlemen, we thank you very much. Okay.
All right, thank you.
In just the past couple of hours, a new challenge to the push by Republicans in Washington to pass their big, beautiful bill before their own self-imposed July 4th deadline. California Governor Gavin Newsom leading an effort from Democratic governors against Medicaid cuts.
This is, in many ways, an understatement of how reckless and cruel and damaging this is to millions and millions of people all across this country, but more than any other state here in California.
Kind of some presidential address vibes going on there. Okay, with us now, Democratic Congressman Sam Liccardo. He's the former mayor of San Jose and represents a Bay Area district now. Welcome. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you again, Chris.
Okay, first question for you. I know you don't support this legislation, but using just your legislative analysis cap, are they going to hit this deadline? You think Republicans are going to get this thing through and hit their deadlines?
You know, I don't have any great insight because I'm the only person I know who's not on Pete Hegseth's signal chain. But I do know in every step of this process so far, I've always wondered, hey, is somebody in the Republican Party going to have the spine to stand up? And they usually always manage to cave to this administration on budget. I don't understand it. I know lots of Republicans are committed, they say, to fiscal responsibility, but they're going to basically sign $5 trillion of debt, and really accelerated debt, on our children and future generations. It makes no fiscal sense.
Okay, we also have tariff news today. Your district, your hometown, is a city that trades and is heavily reliant on trade. I want you to listen to what the president, in one of his many press conferences, said today on that question.
We can do whatever we want. We could extend it. We could make it shorter. I'd like to make it shorter. I'd like to just send letters out to everybody. Congratulations, you're paying 25%.
So the deadline, I believe we started on April 2nd with the tariffs, and now the deadlines are sliding. If you don't like tariffs, this should be encouraging, right? Because it seems like maybe we're not going to get the full blast of these things.
Well, the problem is nobody really knows.
Yeah.
And if you're running a company right now and you have to make critical decisions about supply chains, about hiring, about where you're investing, you have no idea. And I'm hearing that from an awful lot of folks in Silicon Valley right now, which I represent. And I'm hearing it from executives throughout the country. And frankly, the tariffs that are already in place are going to hit us. They haven't hit us yet. We know that from the data. But I was just talking to a senior executive at a major American retailer, told me it's all coming in the third quarter. We've been relying on inventory that got through before the tariffs really hit. American consumers are really going to feel it in this third quarter.
Okay. You're a new Democrat, right? And a new Democrat, for people at home, is actually an old Democrat. It's the old coalition that was in the Democratic Party, Clinton era, 90s. You were a blue dog if you were in the South. You were a new Democrat maybe if you were from someplace else. But the idea is a center-left coalition for Democrats.
That's right.
Not a super week for center-left coalition Democrats. New York mayoral election comes in, and government-run grocery stores and all of that stuff. How do you, as you talk to your fellow Democrats, as you try to navigate this space and say that we got to hold space for moderation and all of that stuff, do you think what's going on in New York and in the party generally makes people more or less receptive to your message?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into what happened in the mayor's race in New York. Certainly, I'm not about to sign up for government-run stores. But on the other hand, his opponent was a walking lawsuit for sexual harassment. And character matters to voters. It should matter to voters, and it did. So it's hard to blame voters when they had those choices.
Yeah, and your colleague, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, had a great week because she was the backer. I saw Gavin Newsom at the beginning. Flag placement, draped in a very way. Do you think that you can't say, but it looks an awful lot like he is positioning himself as that center-left, more moderate Democratic voice in the running, doesn't it?
Folks can position all they want.
Even on a Friday, you're not going to give me anything else. I understand.
You know, look, I'm not really privy to a lot of insights about how this governor is going to run, but there's no question he's going to run. He's been running for 40 years.
See, just a little candor on a Friday. That's all we're looking for. We appreciate it. Okay, if you had ever done the traditional Japanese tea ceremony at the Hakone Estate in Saratoga, California, you would know him already. But if you don't, here he is, Congressman Sam Liccardo. We thank you very much. Okay, coming up, deadline schmedlines. As the president downplays the due date for his big, beautiful bill, is it a sign of trouble, or does it mean they're almost done? And the hunt for the remnants of Iran's nuclear program is on. We've got an arms control expert here to tell us what we will know and when we will know it. Plus, the Supreme Court gives the Trump administration a win as it limits the power of federal judges to issue nationwide injunctions. But what does that mean for the president's push to end birthright citizenship? All that and much more when The Hill returns. Welcome back to The Hill, a live look at the Capitol where Senate Republican leaders are trying to make a deal to pass an updated version of the big reconciliation package at the center of President Trump's second-term agenda. But after a week of setbacks as the Senate parliamentarian nixed key provisions from the House-passed version, the president sounding a more cautious note.
How important is the July 4th deadline to you? If
It's important. It's not the end all.
August?
Looking longer, but we'd like to get it done by that time, if possible.
So mellow. Now, that's not to say he wouldn't like to have it sooner rather than later, posting on social media. We can get it done. Joining us now, people who can definitely get it done. My colleagues from the Hill, White House columnist Niall Stanage and congressional reporter Michael Schnell. Michael, you have some new reporting. They've got a deal. They say they've got a deal on SALT, which is state and local taxes, and how big the exemption for those blue state Republicans is going to be.
Yeah, it's a big deal. SALT has been one of the thorniest hangups that's been dogging these talks, been stalling progress on this big, beautiful bill. So first, I'll give you the boring facts of what this is. It would be a $40,000 cap for 5 years, which would then go down to a $10,000 cap for the next 5 years.
And it currently is how much?
$10,000.
Okay, so they get a short term. So it's another sugar high. They're taking the goodies
That's
now.
Right.
Okay.
And then another part of it is that there's a business path through tax that it won't be limited for SALT. So SALT caucus members agreed to this. Most of the SALT caucus members agreed to this with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent overnight. And so now the big question is, will Senate Republicans take the deal? Because it's an agreement between the administration and the House, but you have to sell it to the Senate in order to get this over the finish line.
And there are no blue state Republican senators. There are no high tax state Republican senators.
Which is why it's always been such an issue, because there are no advocates for that in the House. I will tell you, I spoke to Senator Kevin Cramer earlier today, a Republican from North Dakota. He said he's okay with it. In his eyes, he wishes that it would be zero deduction, but he said he heard from Speaker Johnson today. Speaker Johnson said, this is the best I could do. Kevin Cramer said, look, you got to compromise. I'll take this deal.
Now, I have a theory, and the theory is that they knew that the parliamentarian, so this week they nixed out, you can't do this on Medicaid, you can't do that, you can't do the other thing. This wasn't a surprise to anybody, and that these were sweeteners that they put in the House version that everybody who thought for a second knew would get, some of it at least, would get stripped out in the Senate side. So this is kind of a little game that they've played, right?
That is a theory. I'm not sure that they would completely endorse that idea.
They wouldn't
that
say it out loud.
They have played. That would blow their cover if they have done that. But look, I mean, the fundamental issue here, as you and Michael know very well, is that Republicans are struggling because at both ends of the ideological spectrum of their party, they have senators who are either, on one hand, uncertain about the fiscal consequences of this bill, or on the other, they don't love pretty big cuts to Medicaid and the effects that will have on many of their constituents.
Michael, as they would say on the North Fork of Short Creek, eat the frog first. If you have something bad to do, get it over with. Is that where the Senate's getting to, where they don't like the bill, it's not going to be great, they might as well get it over with? Does that mean Saturday is like a real deal? Is this really happening?
The theme we've been hearing from leadership on both chambers is that no one's going to be thrilled with this package, but there are going to be items that people are happy with, and therefore they'll be able to vote for it. So now, the Senate Majority Leader John Thune has said that the first vote for this package will be noon on Saturday, but he said that was an aspirational time. Now, there's a reason why he is setting these dates and setting these times. He doesn't want members to leave town, right? It's a weekend. They're supposed to be out of session. In fact, they were supposed to be out of session next week for July 4th. If he says, well, we may actually get to this on Sunday or Monday, people may lose town. So John Thune is hoping to get that first vote done on noon tomorrow. If it moves back a little bit, I wouldn't be too surprised. But again, this is part of making it, they want to make it run as smoothly as possible. Once this bill is ready for showtime, they want everybody in the building.
So this is crowd control. He's keeping them where he wants them.
Look, they may hit that time for the vote, and it would be big because it would start the process. But if they slip a little bit, there's a reason why. Crowd control. They want to keep folks.
And I may run in the Boston Marathon, but probably not. Niall, so if the Senate passes this, is the House going to swallow? Are they going to get jammed by the Senate or not? Because what they've been doing so far is playing a game of musical chairs. The music seems like it's about to stop. The president says, you know it's serious. He's canceling a golf trip. He's going to close the deal and be done. Do you think the House takes what the Senate passes, or are they going to try to ping-pong it again?
I think they broadly take what the Senate passes unless there are dramatic changes. And it's because of the reason you cited. For all of these ideological objections that can be raised, there is an enormous reluctance upon Republicans in either chamber to defy the president on what is the signature piece of legislation so far. That's a pretty strong gravitational pull toward getting it passed.
And he's just had this successful week, and he bombed Iran, and everybody's feeling good, and so that'll get get it passed. Okay, I need you guys to stick around because we're going to have you back later on. But there's still much more ahead for you, America. Trump asked point blank, would he bomb Iran again?
Would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely. They're exhausted. And Israel's exhausted too. And I dealt with both of them.
All this as questions linger on how much of Iran's nuclear program was actually wiped out. We're coming to you live from the Middle East and with an expert on fighting the spread of weapons of mass destruction. Plus, when you're on the go, why don't you get your news from Washington as it happens? Download the Hill app for the latest in politics. We'll be right back. Welcome back, and we are halfway through the 6 o'clock hour here on the East Coast, and the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is still holding. Our Robert Sherman is in Tel Aviv with the latest. Robert?
Hey there, Chris. Well, Israel and Iran certainly in the wake of all of this, having these conversations here, that the United States is hoping to continue having these conversations with Iran here. That's the message that you heard from President Trump here today. He wants to expand these diplomatic relations, but has made clear that if Iran continues with their nuclear agenda, well, the United States is prepared to hit them again. Take a listen.
If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you, would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely.
So some mixed messaging is coming out of Iran here tonight. On the one hand, you have the supreme leader who is saying that these strikes had no impact. And on the other hand, Iran's foreign minister acknowledging that there was severe damage done to their nuclear sites. Just moments ago, Iran's foreign minister came out and threatened that if the Israelis strike them again, that there will be firmer retaliation against them. But tonight there's a bit more optimism here as this billboard went up in Tel Aviv, and it shows the big picture, the big goal here in Israel. President Trump standing in the middle next to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and all of the leaders around the Middle East. That is the goal, normalization of Israeli relations. That would likely require solving the situation in Gaza first. The president tonight optimistic that things can move quickly there.
The next week, we're going to get a ceasefire, and we're supplying, as you know, a lot of money and a lot of food to that area because we have to.
So this display was set up outside of the U.S. Embassy today, and it says they are dying. It was set up by the Hostages and Missing Families Forum. A reminder that there are still hostages inside Gaza, and many of these hostage families believe it's going to take the White House in order to get their loved ones home. And they're hoping that time moves quickly for fear that the situation is growing more and more dire in Gaza. Chris?
Robert Sherman, thanks for staying up late for us. We appreciate you. Okay, the debate in Washington about the Saturday strikes on Iran's nuclear program centers on what may remain of the Islamic State's decades-old effort to go nuclear. The White House contends that there was no enriched uranium transported out of the facilities before the strikes, but skeptics are pointing to satellite imagery from outside Iran's Fordo nuclear facility leading up to the strike, which showed trucks lined up outside. President Trump says the U.S. will meet with Iran next week, but Iran has denied that that will happen. Today, the president was asked about what concessions he wants.
Are you demanding not only that there would be no uranium production inside of Iran, but also that Iran would turn over all existing stockpiles of uranium?
Well, you know, we're a little early for that, but something like that, yeah.
Would you also be demanding that the IAEA have full rights to inspect in Iran?
Or somebody, yeah, or somebody that we respect, including ourselves.
Okay, here now, the executive vice president at the Council on Strategic Risk, Mallory Stewart. She served in multiple administrations in the State Department working to limit the spread of nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, culminating in her time as Assistant Secretary of State for the Bureau of Arms Control, Deterrence, and Stability. We could sure use some stability, deterrence, and arms control. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
How much can we really know about what is in Iran from an intelligence standpoint, from a diplomatic standpoint? How much can we really know about what's left?
And that's the fundamental question, is that we can observe the damage from the air. We can try to track as much the resulting consequences of the air campaign, but we won't know where the material truly is, every last bit of it, until someone gets in, until we can verify exactly what was struck, how it was struck, and the consequences of that bombing. And I think anyone who claims to know exactly what was destroyed isn't actually realistically reflecting the ability of the Iranian regime to hide stuff and to effectively tell us the truth or maybe not the truth.
So if the president asked you what he should need, what he should demand in terms of inspection and verification inside Iran, what would you tell him?
Well, first of all, the IAEA has to have access. There has to be an ability for the international inspectors with the credibility, the history, the technical know-how, and the expertise to go in and to really see what happened and to confirm that the existing material that they knew about and they reported on a week before is either still there, is gone, is destroyed, or has some other...
Can they know if it is destroyed?
Probably not, unless Iran agrees to actually give them that information or show them where it is or demonstrate the consequences of the attack.
Okay, and so there's a part of me that wonders that Iran's enthusiasm for the ceasefire is playing for time, because one of the things that we have seen with Iran throughout this long process, decades-long process now, is play for time and try to advance the ball. How much do you think about that? How much do you worry about that?
I think it's a very serious concern, because why not do that right now when there's a ceasefire in place, everything is calm, you can collect whatever material is remaining, move it somewhere safer. The IAEA now cannot come in. They just passed a law, as you reported on here earlier, that the IAEA is no longer allowed to cooperate with Iran. And so they can use that time to rebuild, reformulate, regenerate, and get back to going at a more hidden location that nobody knows about.
Or what about something like a dirty bomb or something down the line?
Yeah, I mean, the radiological sort of effects of this material can be serious even if used in a dirty bomb. Yeah. The challenge, I think, and the real concern that the U.S. and Israel have is the targeting of other countries will require some delivery capacity.
Okay, so if I was the dictator, the ruler of some poor nation in the world, and I looked at how this goes, I say North Korea gets the prince treatment, gets all of this stuff. Pakistan gets pretty good treatment from the United States, and Iran got bombed because they didn't have a bomb. Wouldn't that tell me I better get a nuclear bomb?
Not just for other countries, but those in Iran are having those exact same thoughts, is that if we had had a nuclear weapon, would this have gone down the way it went down? And I think that's the very serious consequence. Diplomacy is put into question, right? On either side, on the U.S. side, on the Iranian side. How can we trust anyone when the underlying inability to really believe that the actions in diplomacy will reflect the willingness to give up a program, the willingness to abide by that diplomatic agreement.
And do you think the Iranians, is there a world in which the Iranians would let Israeli inspectors into Iran?
I cannot imagine that world. I mean, that would be a good idea if they had nothing to hide. The challenge, of course, is that they expect Israel may not be forthcoming, or they have a lot to hide. So either way, it doesn't seem to be in their interest. When they don't believe Israel will report honestly, which is either true or not, they just don't trust Israel, nor are they willing to show everything they have. The IAEA is the best bet for an organization that has the expertise and the credibility to come in and really confirm what they say they're doing and what they say they're not doing.
We are very fortunate that you lent your expertise to us this evening. That is great. Mallory Stewart, we thank you. Coming up, New York State of Mind, or the night the lights went out on Broadway. What are Democrats thinking about the battle brewing in New York's mayoral election? And after almost 6 months of back and forth between the House and the Senate, President Trump says he's ready to close the deal on his big, beautiful bill. You know it must be a big deal because he called off a golf trip. So are Republicans going to lay one out in the fairway, or are they headed for the rough? We'll discuss all that and more with the panel after the break.
This is a really big day. We've had a big week. You know, we've had a big week. We've had a lot of victories this week.
Somebody's got that Friday feeling, but it's been good vibes for the president pretty much ever since he ordered the bombing of Iran on Saturday. He traveled to the Netherlands for a love fest with the other leaders of NATO, sounding like quite the internationalist once he got there. And just today, that big Supreme Court win, justices limiting the power of lower courts to halt Trump's executive orders. But like Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson told us, it's Sunday morning coming down. The good times may not last into next week as senators start digging in their heels on the multi-trillion-dollar tax and spending package the president wants done. The Senate is preparing to start voting on the bill tomorrow, maybe. But if they have any hope of passing it and getting it back from the House before their 4th of July deadline, there is no time to waste. Meanwhile, the White House self-imposed deadline for making trade deals expires on July 9th. Trump says letters will go out across the world over the next week and a half, informing countries of their new tariff rates. This as the world waits to see whether Trump can bring a lasting peace and denuclearization to Iran. So much for the summer slowdown, folks. So let's bring in the panel. We have Carla Sands. That's what your last name is, even if it is not in the teleprompter. I know that that's true. Well, first let's say hi to Niall Stanage. He's the White House columnist for The Hill. Okay, this is our moment of truth. Yemisi Egbawale. Yes, I did it, and now we've won. We can wrap the show. Former White House press office chief of staff and Democratic strategist. Michael Schnell, she's a congressional reporter for The Hill. And as previously mentioned, Carla Sands, she's the former ambassador to Denmark and Greenland. Still. Hello, yes, even still, even now, the constancy. Okay, and Carla, I want to start with you. The Donald Trump that we heard in the Netherlands, loving NATO, they're not trying to hurt us. They just love their countries. The love fest. Trump, the internationalist, it must have surprised you a little.
Not at all.
Not at all.
President Trump took NATO when he first, let's not forget, Obama asked NATO, give us 2% within 10 years by 2024. Most of them didn't reach it, but President Trump pushed them. They reached 2% this year, most of them. And now he's asking for 5%. They all agreed. It's very exciting. This is a new day for NATO. President Trump is talking about them loving their country, because you have to love your country to raise an army and to arm it, to actually invest in that. That is about borders. It's about security. He is a nationalist. We need strong nations to be strong allies.
Yeah, but I mean, Vladimir Putin definitely helped get those spending numbers up. Donald Trump asked, but Vladimir Putin's invasion.
No question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Yemisi. You got to give it to Trump, right? You're a Democrat, but from a political practitioner's point of view, he's had a good week. This after some rough times in late spring, this has been a very good week for the president.
Yeah, I think with the Supreme Court rulings, it's okay to say that he got some wins, and Democrats should say that those wins are more of a warning. I mean, when Stephen Miller came back in the second Trump administration, came back at a higher position with even more influence, and we knew that he was going to project some of the things that he believes into American policy in our everyday lives. And so we're seeing that, and hopefully Democrats respond accordingly.
Well, what does that look like? What does a according Democratic response look like?
Well, one of the things Democrats should really focus on is what's happening in our K through 12 education and also at the college level. We, of course, saw the president of UVA resign today, and we know that that pressure came from Governor Glenn Youngkin in the Trump administration. We saw the Supreme Court ruling that showed in Maryland that parents can opt out of their kids being in classrooms if it focuses on LGBT or trans issues. And so it's really incumbent upon folks like the senators in those states to start really pressuring down.
Pick up a fuss.
Yeah.
Okay. Niall, you remember when in the opening phase of the COVID pandemic, Donald Trump's numbers went up. There was a rally around the flag effect. People were excited about it, that he was the strong leadership from the White House, and Mike Pence was doing those briefings. And then Donald Trump decided it wouldn't be good for Mike Pence to be doing those briefings anymore. And he went down there and he gave him the hook and said he would start going. And he went. And he went until he talked about putting disinfectant in the thing and the light up the thing and the whatever the thing. I watched Trump talk all day. He was on television all day today, all afternoon. And I thought, overexposure is a problem. Like when he's feeling good and he's got the good vibes going, he has a tendency to stay in the limelight too long.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think there's an element of hubris sometimes when things are going well. He's not the only president where this is true, but it is, I think, certainly the case for him that he has a propensity to ignite controversies that ultimately do not help him outside of his own very dedicated base.
And, and sometimes the controversies help get off a bad subject for him, but they also break a winning streak.
Exactly, and they put the focus back onto those traits that he has that people in the middle ground, not all, you know, raging liberals, but people in the middle ground dislike: the propensity for chaos, the propensity to start another controversy as if he hasn't already started 50 of them. All of those things.
Michael, a week ago Friday, we would have been talking about Republican resistance to Donald Trump on war powers and the growing grumbling from Rand Paul and other people and what's going to happen about this. That's not going to happen. Nothing like that's going to happen, right? Because the mood has shifted, the vibe has shifted, right?
I've covered every single iteration and twist and turn in this big, beautiful bill in that building behind us.
Yeah.
And the cadence of how this goes is Republicans say, I'm a no, I'm a no, I'm a no, I'm a hard no, I'm leaning yes, I'm a no, I'm a no, I'm a no. And then right before the vote, Trump gets on the phone, Trump calls him to the White House, they have a conversation, and little do you know, a few hours before the vote, they're a yes, and this thing sails through. It's a testament to Trump's pull and authority over House Republicans. Nobody wants to be that guy to tank his entire legislative agenda. This thing may be hanging by a thread, but at the end of the day, the pressure from the president and the White House, it doesn't seem like anyone wants to play that game.
So the upside, the downside of having narrow margins is you have narrow margins. The upside of the narrow margins is that eyes are on every single person. Everybody's the deciding vote, so that creates a lot of sweat. Okay, you missy. Question. New York is crazy, right? New York politics has always been crazy. It is the nature of the thing. But even I was surprised by what happened in New York with the mayoral primary for Democrats this week. And it is being broadly overinterpreted by tons and tons of people, no doubt. But we do see in clear relief the fault line show up in your party, where you have an AOC-backed candidate in Mamdani triumph over an old sort of Clinton-era Cuomo kind of guy. You see the split. It's got it all there. What's the take from inside the tent?
Well, my hot take is Jersey politics is probably a lot crazier than New York politics.
Fair, not unreasonable, not unreasonable.
And I think that Zohran is a great example of what happens when you run a bad candidate as an opposition for the establishment party. I mean, Cuomo was endorsed by the Clintons, by Bloomberg. He was endorsed by Clyburn. He got $8.6 million, and he still couldn't do it. And it was because he was lazy. He did not adapt to how you have to run as a candidate in 2025. And Donald Trump does this so well with utilizing social media.
So is it good? Would it be good for Democrats if Eric Adams and Cuomo could get out of each other's way and run as an independent? Or do you think that Democrats ought to just say it's going to be Mamdani and come to terms with that?
I think Mamdani is who they want for this time. And I think that we shouldn't over-index this, right? We should use a lot of the tools that he did to campaign. But look, I'm from Georgia. I'm a Southern Democrat. And I know that in the city of Atlanta, issues like rent stabilization and mass transit that he was offering aren't things that will actually connect with the people down there. And so we can use a lot of the tools, but this isn't a one-size-fits-all candidacy for all Democratic cities.
And there are a bunch of New Jersey Democrats who hope that it does not come across the river. So, Carla, it is great for Republicans to be able to talk about Mamdani, and the Democrats are radical, and that's a crazy, crazy, crazy. But Trump is a good foil for Mamdani and Democrats who are trying to win races in blue places too, right? So the more Trump is in that New York race, the more it's about him, the better Mamdani's going to do.
Well, first, I want to speak to Niall and how he talked about President Trump as maybe speaking too much. I actually think it's important that he speaks to get his message out, and I hope that the press will give him fair coverage, because if the press would talk about the wins and be more unbiased in their coverage, I think he would feel less pressed to constantly be speaking.
I think the press have been generally fair in their coverage, and he whines about it all the time, despite his claims of machismo.
92% negative is not fair. But I do think that this young man may be a good foil for Trump, but I think he's a dangerous candidate and could be a disaster, turn New York City into a Democrat hellhole.
Good. I have to let you answer Democrat. We only have about 30 seconds left. I was not anticipating
I think he ran on the premise that New York is an expensive city and people just want to survive. And so some of the things that he's going to initiate, he's going to have to find middle ground, and that's okay. AOC is not running on the exact same platform she did when she first entered her congressional race. She has found middle ground. He will do the same.
All right, we're going Okay.
AOC's middle ground.
Well, no. Okay, for AOC, she's a winner out of this, right? This is good for her in her 28 bid, right?
Yeah, and let me be, not for the first time, taking the unpopular position. I think the downside of Mamdani has been vastly overrated. And I'll tell you why. Apart from things like his views on the Middle East, we have a populace that is very unhappy with the status quo. It is often the case that President Trump is cited as a disruptor whose promise to disrupt appeals to voters. I think there is space for someone on the left to do the same, and I think Mamdani is that.
The horseshoe points at itself at the bottom. Okay, panel, we thank you. Stick around. When we come back from the Middle East to the Netherlands, back to Capitol Hill, it's time for my news quiz. Let's hope I pass. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she's following the latest nuclear threat that could reshape international diplomacy. That threat is not from Iran, it's from Pakistan. That's at 7 p.m. Eastern. Welcome back to the Hill. Thanks for hanging out with me in Blake's place. He'll be back to take good care of you. But before we go, be sure to catch the Hill Sunday this weekend at 10 a.m. We'll be talking to Roger Marshall, Republican senator from Kansas, and Democratic Congresswoman from Massachusetts, Lori Trahan. It's going to be a good show. We're going to have a good time. So thank you for watching The Hill on NewsNation. And remember to download the Hill app for the latest news in politics. We're back on Monday at 6. Elizabeth Vargas Reports starts right now.